Get yourself in the lotus position, because I've got no plan, no pretense, and definitely no bypassing. I'm Josh Connolly, and this will probably be dysfunctional. Yes, my coffee is back on the iPad. We still haven't bought a side table yet. It's got to happen sometime in the future, but it ain't happening yet. Also couldn't be bothered to set up the arm of my microphone, so I'm going rogue today. And you have got me just holding the mic. And before I get started, there is one thing that I want to ask, right? So the picture that I use for this podcast is an AI picture, and it's me taking the mic, right? Do people know that? Because somebody said to me at Uncommon Man last week or whenever it was, that their friend had seen that I got a new podcast out and basically said, what's happened to Josh? Have you seen the picture on his podcast? And didn't realise that it's taking the piss. Now, it was Mark, my friend, was like, no, I'm pretty sure he's taking the piss with that picture. But do people get that? Do I need to change the picture? It's supposed to be like tongue-in-cheek, poking fun. But if people are not getting that, then the picture needs to change, because I can't have people thinking that that is actually how I want to look in the picture. I probably would wear those robes, to be fair. Anyway, it's Monday morning. I'm recording on Monday morning today, so the day before this goes out, and instead of Friday, because I've been doing it on Friday for the last couple of weeks. And I came into the office this morning. I was in fucking good spirits, high mood. You're going to get me in good energy. But last night I reposted a reel from last year about when toxic parents still send birthday cards. And I said, look, because, you know, Christmas is coming up, and I know that this time of year is when these sorts of parents will check in and start sending birthday cards in that way. And yeah, I mean, it's got the same fucking, it's blown up in the same way that it did last time. And you get a lot of the parents on here that just don't understand. One of the key comments that I get from people, by the way, is, and if we don't send cards, then we get abused for that. And I'm like, listen, I know that estrangement happens for lots of different reasons, right? I know that it's a complex issue. I specifically talk about a certain kind of parent that, by the way, uses the struggle that people that are facing family estrangement actually go through, uses that to their advantage to perpetuate their victimhood. So if you are estranged from family for reasons other than the toxic parents in the way that I'm talking about, then you should also be pissed off with these people that are using your very genuine difficult situation to perpetuate their own victimhood, okay? These specific people tap into all of these kind of things to be able to perpetuate, as I've said, their own victimhood. And these people who have abused, and it is emotionally abused, their children throughout their whole life, and then still use sending cards as a way to continue that abuse, despite if a firm boundary has been put up of no contact. If you think that their only option is to send a card and to not send a card, if we were talking about real people, then they should be looking at changed behavior. Change your fucking behavior. All right. And the reality is that when we're talking about the certain type of parent that I'm talking about, they won't change their behavior. And people need to understand this. Toxic, emotionally abusive people exist. They fucking exist. And most of them have kids. And they are not toxic, abusive, and horrible to everyone apart from their kids. In fact, it's normally the opposite way round. They are normally as lovely as they can be to the people around them, because how they're perceived publicly and by people outside of their family is more important to them than anything in the world. And so they'll behave like that outwardly, and then they are awful to their kids. Again, like I've said loads of times in the past, if you don't understand that, then that's great for you, right? That's great for you. But I think a lot of these people that turn up commenting on the post, I'll be completely honest with you, you click on some of them and they've got in their bio, family first, family is everything, and all this kind of stuff. And listen, if you've got that in your bio, I think that's great if those things are actually true, right? I'm not sort of saying that you shouldn't have that in your bio, but you can just see it a mile off, man. You can see these people a mile off. In their profile, it's normally all fucking loving shit, live, love, laugh, keep calm and carry on, positive vibes only. And again, I'm not against any of those sayings, but they're just common with the type of person I'm talking about. And now I want to make a key point here, because the subject today that I'm going to talk predominantly about is children of alcoholics. When I talk about toxic parents, right, there is like I write in the book that there's a sliding scale of what I'm talking about, right? I think we can all experience a level of what we might call toxicity from even the best of parents, right? We all have our toxic traits, and though we might not like to admit it, I believe those traits, the worst of us, tends to come out when we interact with our children, mainly because toxic traits come about in relationship to how we experienced life when we were children. And so our children have a tendency to trigger the child part inside of us. I'm a parent myself. My children will be able to talk about some of my own toxic traits, right? So there is a sliding scale. When I talk about the toxic parents right up at this end, they are a certain fucking breed, all right? They are a certain breed. And I do think that on the whole, it's difficult for most people to understand that level. When I talk about children of alcoholics, when I talk about alcoholic parents, I'm not necessarily saying that a parent that is an alcoholic is toxic, right? I'm not saying that. Now, their children will experience lots of toxicity as a result of their addiction. But I do think that you can have people that get trapped in addiction that are good people, that, struggle with the world and seek escape. And as a result of that, they get locked up and trapped up and rolled up in addiction. I'd like to consider myself as one of those people. All right. Then you get toxic and horrible people who get trapped up in addiction, and they're very different. But what I would say is that when I was trapped in addiction, my behavior was very narcissistic. And so if I had never got free of addiction and remained trapped in addiction my whole life, then my kids could have said that I'm a toxic parent. Like they absolutely could have said that. Because I will have become emotionally abusive as a result of the things I'm talking about. And this is why I posted earlier this week or last week about one of these gurus online. Now, I'm not against gurus. I have my own favorite gurus, right? There are times when I'm in a certain place and I'll hear a certain quote online and it fucking really lands. When I look throughout my whole journey, there's been times when you hear these quotes, right, and they really land. It's a moment in time and they land, and if you looked at them, in the realities of life, they don't quite marry up, but they have an impact on you. So I'm not against them, right? I understand their space. But the issue I had with this one guy, and I can't remember his name, but like I say, I've seen some stuff on him. There was one, just for a bit of balance, I saw a post that he did about a woman had said she couldn't get over somebody that she was in love with, an ex-partner, and she was asking him, how do you get over it? And he said something along the lines of, what you need to understand is that when you fall in love with somebody, you fall in love with the version of yourself that you become when you're around them. And I really loved that. And because he went on to say, when you understand that, then you understand that version of yourself exists free from them and you can access it without them. And I thought that was really powerful, right? I love that. It gives you some power back, and I really enjoyed it. But then somebody actually sent me this video of him. And the key thing to understand here is that he was responding to somebody that said simply, all they said, it was a comment that said, how do you forgive your parents? His response, for me, was just disgusting. So some of the key things that he said, you need to understand that you choose your parents, that your spirit chose your parents to learn the lessons that you needed to learn. He said some stuff about forgiveness where he was like, he sort of didn't say that you have to forgive them. Now, I've talked extensively about how I don't think you have to forgive them. He was coming at it from a slightly different angle. I quite liked that angle, actually. What he was saying is, it's a bit high and mighty to say that I can forgive someone. Actually, as I'm saying it, I think I don't like it. So he was saying that you're taking a position of power. So he was actually saying that's bad. But actually, I think if somebody's abused you and you can find a position of power to say, should I or shan't I forgive you? I think that's fucking all right. So let's put the forgiveness bit to the side. But he said that we pick our parents. And then he went on to say that like it's the ego that believes that, you know, if you're struggling in your life today as a result of what you experienced when you was a child, then you're just using it to perpetuate your victimhood. And that really fucking pisses me off. It really pisses me off because it's not true. When you experience abuse at any age, particularly when you're a child, at the hands of somebody who is fucking supposed to keep you safe, who brought you into this world, right? It will change you forever. That's not victimhood to say that it will, right? And actually, there's a long process that you have to go through of feeling all of the pain, feeling the hurt, feeling all of that. Bearing in mind that if that parent's still alive when you're an adult, they're probably still abusing you as well, right? So then like, there's all of that to contend with. So to give the answer that he did to somebody that had written a one-line comment, like, how do I forgive my parents? And to do it from such a kind of high almighty way was fucking ridiculous. Now, I understand that when you are in the position that he is in, it looks like he's quite big, right? Quite well known. You have to be really careful for that. I recognize that I can sometimes do that. I can sometimes fall into, when I'm talking about toxic parents, right? I close my mind and I become, you know, over authoritarian with it. You know, my curiosity closes and I can answer questions sometimes in a bit of nothing else is true and my answer's right. So I get that. I don't want to dig him out too much for that because I think we have to have an appreciation that can happen, right? But the idea that you pick your parents, now, I'm going to caveat this as well. I love spiritual chat. I love sitting and contemplating, right? Did we choose this? What parts of religion do I like? Is there a bit of Christianity I like? Sikhism, Buddhism, Muslim stuff, right? I love that. I have spent time in my own journey reading spiritual text and taking parts from it and really contemplating the idea. I love the mysticism, the curiosity that comes with some of the things that we can't explain. I love all of that. And you have to work through that, I believe, and then understand that you need to integrate those thoughts and beliefs into real and true life. And you can't fucking mix the two. You can't speak to somebody that's been abused and just fire fucking spiritual ideals at them on Instagram like it's going to fucking solve everything. That's where it's a real problem. That's where actually what I think is lacking is the integrative work. Because when I first started getting into, so I went bang down the Christian route, by the way. When I was about a year and a half sober, I became very, I was into Christianity, and then, you know, I feel very restricted by anybody that's like, this has to be the one true way. But I know that like a year or two into my journey, these spiritual ideals, I picked them up, and what I did is, like when my life felt too painful, when my true life experience felt too painful, I would use these spiritual ideals to not be with the pain. Now, there was some real benefit in that. I think it was really useful. I would argue to a degree, and I'm trying to be as balanced as I can here, that the breakdown of religion in the way that it's happened has left a bit of a hole in the way that we make sense of our pain. So I think everybody is free to make sense of their pain in their own way. If you believe that that you were, you know, your soul picked before you came here, you picked the body and you wanted to learn these lessons, I think it's great I think that's great for you. I think that's brilliant. I just don't think you should push that on somebody that's fucking, you know, potentially been abused or had a difficult childhood. What we really need, I think, what we really need over a period of time is to work through the truth of our experience. And then the idea that to accept that you still struggle as a result of your experiences when you were a child, the idea that that perpetuates your victimhood, that is bollocks. It's bullshit. If you experience difficulty at the hands of a parent when you was a child, whether, maybe they're dead now, and so you then have to work through that, or maybe they're still alive and you know they're out smear campaigning you, or still abusing you from afar, or still trying to get to you in different ways, or maybe you've got family, so you're still trying to navigate the relationships with them and it's messy and it's difficult. If you struggle as a result of that, you're not perpetuating your victimhood. If anybody around you can't be with you in the pain that you're experiencing, then they are fucking bypassing and avoiding their own shit. That is what I believe, right? I believe that. I see it in myself. When I push the emotion down in you, it's because I can't experience what it feels like and I'm too scared to be with it in myself. Again, spiritual bypassing to a degree, sometimes we need to do it, but don't fucking push it on other people. If what people should say, if you can't be with somebody in their pain, if you feel uncomfortable being around somebody who's expressing their struggle that they're going through, you have the problem. You need to do the work on yourself. Don't push your bypassing shit onto them. Again, trying to be as balanced as I can here. Bypassing is needed sometimes. Sometimes we need it in that moment. And I had a couple of interactions actually as a result of that. And maybe on another one, what I'll do is screenshot some of these, some of the interactions that I have, because it really helps you understand some of these passive aggressive people that exist in these spaces. There was one interaction that I was having with somebody in the comments, and you get pulled into it, by the way, because then I was kind of doing the same back to them, because I could tell what they were doing. The sort of passive aggressive, very subtle ways that some of these people will place themselves in a position that's higher than you, and then they'll look for some reactive abuse. So one person was commenting and they were saying, you have to put in a lot of work, but one day you'll get to a place where you'll be able to understand this. And I'm like, it was words to that effect, I'm paraphrasing it. And I was like thinking, I know what you're doing here. And if I sort of bite, right, and because what happens is generally we don't want to call that out, because we can feel that it's triggering us a little bit. So then we think that's me. So I want to show that I'm not affected. And I think, no, when somebody's being passive aggressive to you, if it pisses you off and affects you, that's fucking normal. It should piss you off. So in the end, I called it out. I said, you're just being passive aggressive. You're trying to separate yourself. And listen, they'll always have an answer. They always come back with an answer. They always have an answer to come back at you at. So in normal life, never engage with these people. If in any way you can help it, the best thing you can do is not engage with these people. So yeah, look, I wanted to talk about children of alcoholics today. That's what I wanted to get onto. I didn't know I was going to go where I've just been. It was Addiction Awareness Week this week, or Action on Addiction Awareness Week. And I went to an event. It was a really good event on Monday last week. And children of alcoholics are now part of the conversation when it comes to addiction, but they're still not a proper part of the conversation. They're not a good enough part of the conversation, and they're not involved in the conversation in the way that they should be. We live in this place where I think addiction is being destigmatized. Let me caveat that a minute. Addiction is being destigmatized when it comes to drugs and alcohol. There's still a lot of stigma there, right? But we are going places, we're moving places. I think people now can, stand up and say, I'm an addict, or I'm an alcoholic, and we will celebrate them, and we will celebrate them in their recovery. I think we're sort of moving towards that space, right? It's certainly improved a massive degree. Now, once upon a time, children of alcoholics weren't even allowed at the table. It was, they were pushed down and very overtly sort of pushed away. Some of the difficulties that NACOA faced, and NACOA's been going for like 35 years now, in its originality when it first came about 35 years ago, the addiction space would actively push them away. They would say, you talking brings shame to the alcoholic or the addict trying to find recovery, and it's not useful, and it doesn't help anybody. So it's taken a lot of work, and in more recent years now, NACOA, is part of this conversation. The impacts faced by children impacted by parents drinking are now way more in the conversation. But, and it is a big but, people still won't allow children of alcoholics to have their truth. Now, there was a time where one of the leading alcohol charities back in, a few years ago, the CEO of that charity was, came out publicly and told people they shouldn't be saying children of alcoholic if the parent isn't identifying as an alcoholic. And that is, there was a lot of struggle that went on as a result of that. And I don't think people understand what it's like to be the child of an alcoholic. Now, let me be clear here. I am the child of an alcoholic. I lost my dad when I was 9 years old, and I went on to be an alcoholic addict myself. And I'm in recovery from my alcoholism and my addiction. So I'm 12 and a half years sober and clean in that respect. And I was the child of an alcoholic. I am the child of an alcoholic. And I want to just talk about both and try and give you some understanding. One of the things that's really important to understand is that when you think about children of alcoholics, what people tend to think about is how horrible it must have been to see your mum or your dad or your parent, your caregiver, drunk in that way. And, we imagine like fights and domestic violence and the house being smashed up and like, wow, that must have really affected you and impacted you when you were a child. All of that's true, right? You have to do some healing as a result of that, right? But what I would say is that when you get to your adulthood, you can see that when somebody drinks too much or does drugs, with an adult rational brain, you can see that that they didn't necessarily mean it, or when anybody drinks too much, they act erratically and stupidly and all that kind of stuff. The lasting negative impacts that happen to children when they're affected by a parent's drinking is the secrecy and the shame that surrounds the drinking. It's the behaviors and the processes that happen when we're children in order to keep the secrecy of the addiction, to protect the addict at the center of the house. And that's the lasting negative impacts that happen that people don't understand. And so people don't even realize that when a parent finds recovery and stops drinking, that's not the solution. In and of itself, that is not the solution for a child of an alcoholic. It's not like, oh, my parents stopped drinking now, so all of my problems have gone away. The impacts that it's had, like the brain is developing at its fastest rate in those initial years. We know this. I talk about this all of the time. And so when I was developing a sense of self, I was developing it in dysfunction, right? I was developing it in a home where there was an alcoholic at the heart of the house. And so I become way more likely to have addiction when I'm older. I develop my sense of self based on that. And so let me give you an example, because I want to really get clear on how even recovery for the parent doesn't necessarily even not just stop doesn't just take the problem away for a child. It can be really difficult for them when the parent finds recovery, because whenever a parent is not drinking, when you live with a parent who drinks too much, whenever they're not drinking, they can be the times of most anxiety, because you're like waiting. When's the next one going to go? You're trying to read the energy in the room all of the time. You're fucking hypervigilant. You can tell how drunk your parent is by the way they put the key in the door, the sound of their breath, the volume of the TV, the way that they interact with you, that fucking look in their eye that nobody else can see. You can tell when they've had a sip of alcohol and when it's starting to come. Like, you're so hypervigilant and so overtuned into that. Sometimes they're the most anxious moments. I mean, it's scary when they're drunk, but at least when they're drunk, you're not waiting. They're drunk, right? So when they find recovery, what do you think that goes away? Bearing in mind, the child of an alcoholic has been told by that parent in most cases that they're never going to drink again every fucking day. Every day after a spree, instead of sitting with the truth of what that child experienced last night, they'll just get, I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm not going to drink again. Now, this isn't a dig at people that are trapped in addiction. That's not what this is. Right? This isn't a dig at people and saying you need to fucking see how bad it was for the children. But if these children are going to have their own healing, their own recovery, then they need to talk about their truth. Just as now we see so many alcoholics and addicts sitting on stages and talking about their truth and saying this is my truth and proudly and boldly proclaiming that. I think that's great, man. I'm fucking so glad that's happening. But what about child of an alcoholic? Because I'm in spaces now. I go and everybody says I'm sober now. I've been sober for a year, and everybody celebrates and cheers, and then they can share all their hardship. You know, I was horrible. I did this. Had children, and I think it's great, man. I think it's so good that we break the stigma and they talk about it. Because when they talk about it in that way, shame can't exist, right? It's fucking brilliant. But what about those children? Can you be in a room and let them talk about it for their healing, so they can proudly proclaim, I'm on a journey, I'm healing. My parent is still drinking, or my parent's sober. My parent's been sober for 5 years, maybe. Yeah, I'm making up examples here. And still I worry. Still I don't want to bring them my shit because I don't want to be the reason that they relapse. And if we're not careful, some of what happens is these parents get sober and then they come and proudly proclaim, I'm sober now, everything's changed, our life's better, I'm going to do all the things for the kids now. And in some ways, they snatch some of the roles back that these children have bought. If you're a child that has cared for your mum or your dad your whole life, you've cared for the siblings, you make sure they get showered or bathed at night, you make sure they take lunch to school, you make sure that, you know, one of the most loving interactions that you used to have with your parent is when you put a blanket over them because they fucking passed out drunk again, right? And then all of a sudden this parent is sober and everyone's like, you must be so happy, it must feel so good. And for some reason these children think, all I've ever wanted is for them to get sober, and I don't like it. Why? Because their role in life, their whole sense of self was developed around the alcoholism or the addiction of their parent. And so I still feel a sense of this when I go to addiction spaces. And I know this is uncomfortable, and I don't want to make people in recovery feel uncomfortable. But when I sit there and everybody celebrates, and then, you know, and I do the same. I'm an addict myself, an alcoholic myself. I talk about my misdemeanors, and I can talk about them with a freedom and even a sense of humor because I'm free of them now. Yeah. And so I think it's great that they do that. And I think it's great that this can be done. But we still have the silence of children of alcoholics. We still have the silence of children of alcoholics who dare not speak. Dare they upset all of the alcoholics and the addicts that are in recovery? And I know we're not supposed to use the term alcoholic, yeah? Look, I'm not going to go off on that fucking... I'm not going to go off on that tangent or down that rabbit hole. But we know that people should be able to self-identify. We need to give people language that they resonate with, that they can speak to, that lands with them. Like the addict. When they say, I'm an addict, I'm fucking owning it. That's who I am. What about a child of an addict, child of an alcoholic? They need the opportunity to say, I'm that, and own it too. But currently they don't. Currently they don't. So let me be really, really clear about this. The solution for children of alcoholics and children of addicts is not their parent getting recovery. That might help. That might create space for them. But it is not the solution in and of itself. They need their own recovery. They need their own healing. I'm 12 and a half years into the recovery from my own addiction. I can tell you now, categorically, without doubt, the hardest work, the hardest thing to heal from is the fucking childhood stuff at the result of my dad drinking. Because we can talk about these things rationally, and we do, right? So my dad died when I was like 9 years old, yeah? I saw some terrible things when my dad was drinking. I saw some terrible behaviors. There were moments when I was frightened as a result of the way that he was when I was a kid. The shouting, the banging, the arguing, the screaming. And I can talk till the cows come home if you want me to in the rational sense. It wasn't his fault. Addiction is not a choice. And I know all of them things. I believe them to be true. I raise awareness of those things, yeah? I want people to understand that addiction is not a moral failing, right? I want people to understand that that addiction is not a choice, right? That it's not about love in all of these cases. I raise awareness of that. I do that as an addict myself. And as the child of an alcoholic, in my body, I still have the question, was I not good enough? My sense of self, of whether I'm fucking lovable. There's part of me that still says, what, like, you couldn't stop for me? And again, you want to give the rational answers, and I understand that, yeah? And you want to come in with these spiritual ideals and all of that. It's great. It's great. All of them's great. And sometimes I can find comfort in them. And sometimes I connect with the child part of myself that still has that question. Now, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, then again, we come back to the idea that that's on you. And so when you look at the traits that children of alcoholics pick up, I mean, one of the things that I think's well worth talking about after like a particularly bad night of drinking, yeah? When somebody has a bad night of drinking and the next morning they think, I don't want to think about that. So blackout sometimes happens not only because you drank so much that you blacked out, but it also happens because you disassociate and you don't want to think about it so much. You push it so far down in your body, you don't have to think about it. Because Jesus Christ, what happened last night? I don't want to have to think about it. How many times does that happen downstairs in the living room while the child's upstairs listening? What do you think they do the next day? Where do you think their emotions go? How do you think they deal with that? What do you think it's like for the child that grows up in a home where they're upstairs and they're just listening, they're tuned in, they're hearing the footsteps downstairs, they're realizing somebody's getting more and more drunk down there because they know the change in the pattern in the way that they walk, the tone of the voice that they can hear. Then there's a fight, then there's an argument, then they're worried that their parent might be dead or they're passed out, right? And then they go down the next morning and everybody's acting like everything's completely normal and completely fine. What about those kids? What about the impact on them? What about the space for them to be able to talk about it? Do you think that when they get older and maybe they see that parent recover, maybe that parent doesn't recover until they're an adult? But now that they've recovered, the child's just got to think that my whole childhood's gone. My whole childhood's gone, lost to your addiction. But now that you're sober and that you've recovered, I should just be happy. Now, there is a sense of, can we move towards that as children of alcoholics? If we do have a parent that's in recovery, can we move towards that? Yes, let's move towards it. But there's work here, because we need to look at all of our stuff. We need to heal from that stuff. And I think this is really difficult. I think this is really difficult for the addiction space. They need to navigate it. They need to do more. They need to do better. Because there's still a sense in the addiction space. And again, this isn't a dig at the people that are involved in it. It's not a dig in the, anybody that's organizing it. This is just me, the child of an alcoholic, trying to raise awareness of the plight of children affected by drinking in this way. There's still a sense that we're sort of tagged on, but can you not make too much noise about your experience because we're trying to celebrate the addicts that are finding recovery. We're trying to do this work over here, and like your shit is really uncomfortable and nobody really wants to heal it, and we risk upsetting all of the addicts and the alcoholics over here. So you're welcome because we understand that it's a family illness, but don't upset them over here. And can you just keep... So do you understand what I'm trying to say here? And that's why we got to do more. And we need to understand that when a child talks about their experience, it's not betrayal. They're talking about the truth of their experience. Children of alcoholics tend to grow up way more likely to have addiction issues themselves, right? Way more likely to want to escape themselves. They're way more likely to struggle emotionally, to struggle in relationships, feelings of low self-worth. And yet they're not involved in the conversation enough. And that's what I want to change. And so next year, February is Children of Alcoholics Week. So I'm going to go big on that. I really want to reconnect with and re-emphasize the support for children affected by parents drinking. It's where this journey started for me. It'd be 10 years ago in 2025 that I found NACOA. If you don't know who NACOA are, they're the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. Incredible charity, raising awareness for children affected by parents drinking. And again, like, I just want to reiterate that I do a lot of talking about toxic parents, and it's a slightly different conversation because, you know, the living grief that you experience at the hands of a toxic parent, because sometimes, at the hands of an alcoholic parent, the living grief that you experience is really difficult, because there are many cases where people trapped in addiction are good people that have just been pulled in, that life feels too much for them, and then they've had to seek escape in the way that they do. And addiction catches all of us, you know. I don't think anybody's addiction free, you know. I think you know, the work addict walks past a homeless guy on the street on the way to work and says, why don't you get a job? But they've got 3 failed marriages because they can't stop working. So you've got the workaholic, there's the sexaholic, the loveaholic, the relationship-aholics, sugaraholics, all of these things. Like, addiction doesn't escape any of us. Sort of lost my trail of thought a little bit with the point. But the point is that the point I was making is that, you know, people trapped in addiction, I'm not necessarily saying are the same as toxic parents or toxic people. Not always. However, if they're trapped in it all of their life, then what the person that loves them experiences is difficult. And I think, look, in general, not just looking at addiction, but even like what we call mental health problems and all that kind of stuff now, we never talk about what it's like to love somebody like that. We never talk about how hard it is to love somebody trapped in this stuff and what the truth is. And you can have 2 truths, you know, you can love somebody dearly and hate the way that they show up, you know, and that's like complex, isn't it? If you've got somebody who's trapped in addiction and just keeps doing these horrible things time and time again, keeps going back to whatever it is, the alcohol or the drugs, and you get these glimpses of the person that they could be, this nice, good person that they could be, you get the glimpses and then boom, they're gone again. You know, and that constant battle between those things, it's really hard. I think it's really, really hard for a lot of people. I think I've made my point. I think I'm coming to a natural close here. You can see that I didn't make any notes today. I was going to like go through some of the traits, and maybe we'll do that in the future. And I know that on the previous podcast, by the way, that I said that I would talk about Christmas. We're going to do that next week. I really am going to do that next week. We'll try and like get some questions in for that as well. But yeah, look, this is podcast 5, man, which feels like a little bit of a landmark. Big plans for it for next year. I really, you know, I'm loving it. I'm really, really enjoying it. It feels like a really cool space for me to just come and absolutely run my gums at you. I'm loving all of the feedback. Please keep it coming. All the feedback helps. Things that you'd like to see, things that you don't want to see. And then just help me grow this. Please like share these on your stories and stuff like that, and share them. Share it on social media so that we can start to bump this up the ladder. Next year, I'm going to be introducing the idea of speaking to people. Not all of the time. I'm not going to put myself under pressure to make them all be speaking to people, but I've got a few different ideas. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I think I'm about done here. So as always, I've been Josh Connolly, and this was definitely dysfunctional. I did tell you it would be dysfunctional. So thank you for sticking around till the end here. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, then please help me to grow Dysfunctional by sharing with your friends on social media. You can find me at Josh_FFW. And then wherever you're listening to this or watching this, please make sure that you've liked and subscribed, left us a 5-star review and a comment if your platform allows it. And I'll see you on the next one.